It's already 5 minutes past, and I think that we need to start. It is already 30 participants. We will allow to enter after we start. Maybe someone will join. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see you at our supply chain webinar. My name is Andrei. I'm a VP of Sales in IBM Cloud Company, and today I will moderate our webinar. Before we start, I want to talk about a few organizational moments. First of all, who we are. We are specialists in supply chain management, and our mission is to deliver innovations to business. We have already helped more than 100 companies to achieve their KPIs in supply chain management with the help of our software and our experience. Our clients are from different fields of business. These mainly are manufacturers, distributors, and retailers, all who have some inventory. And today we have invited the key experts of our company, our partner, and our client. First speaker will be Carol Ptak. She's co-founder of Demand-Driven Institute and Vice President of Apex. Second one is Sviatoslav Oliinyk. He is Chief Executive Officer of Intuiflow in IBM Cloud Company. And our client, Irina Yurchenko, Head of Purchasing in Ptak. All of them will speak today about their experience in supply chain management. You have an opportunity to ask your questions aloud at the end of each section. You need to raise your hand and we will turn on your microphone. Or you can type your questions in a chat. We will take a 5-minute break at the end of each speech to give answers. I wish you to get information today that you can use with or without us. Good luck. Carol, can you show your presentation, please?
Absolutely. It is really my pleasure to be here today. When Sviatoslav asked me if I would do a presentation today, of course, the answer was yes. It is really my pleasure to kick off this webinar, their first English webinar from our Ukrainian affiliate, IBM Cloud. So I'm going to take us through about 20 minutes of an introduction to the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model to set the stage for the next two presentations. And I think what we can all agree on is we're living in a VUCA world, this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. And this is nothing new. From 9/11, when the United States was attacked, to our 2008, when our stock market collapsed, we had a SARS epidemic. The last couple of years, we've had the COVID epidemic. We've had hurricanes. We've had wars. We've had disruptions in the supply chain. You see a picture of the ship sitting off the coast of California as China shut down. And then all the container ships came into California, exacerbated by the policies in California that all the truck drivers had to be vaccinated and that all the trucks had to be new trucks. And many of the truck drivers just said, not going to drive in California anymore. So this backed up the ships. So now there's no ships to go back. We've had tornadoes, we've had floods, we've had hurricanes, and of course, most recently, we have a war that's impacted the supply chain around the world. So what is VUCA? VUCA is volatile. We really don't know what's happening, and the kind of disruptions that we're seeing, it's not a matter of if, it's when they're going to happen. Uncertainty. As we consider trying to predict what's coming to us up in the future, We've traditionally looked at the past, and if we tortured it with some kind of mathematics, it could tell us the future. Well, our future looks very different than the past. It's complex. We named supply chain so many years ago. We thought in terms of operations, and we thought about connecting our operations to our customer, and then our customer's customer, and our supplier, and our supplier's supplier. And we thought of it as a chain, but we were very wrong, because supply chains have never been chains. Supply chains have always been complex adaptive systems with many, many nodes and many, many connections. And add to that, it's ambiguous. This city could be Paris, could be New York, could be just about any large city around the world. So even though we can see, we really don't know what's going on. So this VUCA world is our new normal in supply chain. Let's compare where we were in 1965 to where we are today. And you can see what we're trying to manage is the absolute opposite. The world that we had in the 60s was much simpler, longer lead times, longer product life cycles. We had a much better forecast accuracy. Now we're living in very short customer tolerance time, a lot of complexity. We've got many, many long lead time parts. And in fact, for many of our suppliers, we don't even know what our lead times are going to be. And very big pressures for leaner inventories. So how do we need to look ahead, and how are we going to move forward in this very VUCA time, this very uncertain time where we don't know what's right around the corner? So our first assumption is that we have to assume that big disruptions are going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and where. And also, leadership cannot build a business and supply chain model based on the idea that they're going to maximize profit that ignores assumption number one, that disruptions are going to happen. And we've seen this in the publicly held companies, even in my country, is what they're valuing in companies is not overall profitability, but understanding supply chain risk and how that supply chain risk is mitigated. So what is the objective? For us to survive is we need to be resilient. And I think our host of our webinar today is the epitome of demonstrating that kind of resilience. They have a country that's under attack. We have a speaker today that their corporate headquarters has been destroyed, but their warehouse is still functional and they're still innovating. It's that ability of our system to return to equilibrium after a large disturbance, whether something we've done or had something imposed upon us, or as through a large disturbance. Because what we know, if we're too rigid, that disturbance will put us right into chaos, will destroy the company. So it's really interesting, is The Economist in 2021 wrote a very interesting article talking about the need for supply chain resilience in this area of turbulence. And there were two recommendations were the company should seek to build supply chain resilience and the ability to adapt to the VUCA world. And the recognition that investors in companies are beginning to very closely watch how companies foster resilience. Now, in the Economist article, they didn't talk about how to do that, but I think it's pretty well understood globally that we have a need to do that. So how do we achieve resilience? Well, resilience requires coherence. And coherence is that ability to align our company. And our company is in alignment, which causes coherence when we pull in the same direction. When we have departments or subsystems that are not in alignment, that causes coherence to break down. And that also pushes our system into collapse as we start to work against each other rather than with each other against the outside market. So as we consider this, let's look at this alignment of local actions with a global objective is not a new idea. It's something that Taiichi Ohno talked about in Lean as he talked about his river production system. It's been talked about by Dr. Goldratt with TOC as he considers what is the constraint and how do we subordinate to the constraint. And it's been talked about by Dr. Deming in the development of Six Sigma, is understanding how do we mitigate variability, all right, so that we can overall improve our facility. But we have to be asking ourselves the question, and the Economist article didn't say this. It said, yes, we need to achieve resilience, We know we can achieve resilience by achieving coherence, but coherence to what? What is it that we're really going after? What really is the true objective of a supply chain? And how do we keep our subsystems, our departments aligned to that objective? Is there a fundamental principle that can focus every system and every subsystem on the objective? Well, I can tell you that there is, and it's called flow. A very simple concept, been around for years and years and years. But it's interesting, that's not how we've been managing our companies. What we need to do is focus from our coherence looking for cost reduction to coherence looking for flow so that we can achieve that alignment and resiliency. The idea of flow goes back to the earliest days of MRP. George Plausill, who was one of the founders of MRP, always said that all benefits are directly related to the speed of flow of materials and information. Anytime you heard George speak, George always said this. Because what we know is when flow is occurring, then we know we get good service. And service is consistent and reliable when things are flowing well. We also know that when we have good service, we have maximum and protected revenue, because these are critical items because we get good service. We also have minimal inventories. Well, this already flies in the face of traditional supply chain management, which has the underlying assumption and belief that to have better customer service, I have to have more inventory. But the reality is as I have better flow, I have better service with less inventory. And that our expenses, the costs that we go through to getting production out the door, are minimized. And that our cash flow follows the rate of our product flow to our market demand. And a company can be profitable on the books, but if I run out of cash, I've got a company that's gone extinct. So I would submit to you that if we protect and promote flow, we will maximize return on investment. And that return on investment is really the overall objective for every for-profit company around the world. You know, it's always interesting when I talk to executives and I say, well, what's the goal? And a lot of people understood part of Ellie Goldratt's message and they said, well, to make money. Except to make money usually means profit, which is revenue minus cost. And so what we do is we focus on cost. That's not what Ellie said, is that he was looking at sustainability. And how do we measure that? We measure that in terms of return on investment. I've had many companies where I've offered to go in and run their company for them and drive costs to zero. Because if your goal is to minimize cost, then wouldn't that be the logical end item? Well, I've never had anybody take me up on that, because what they recognize is that when my costs are zero, my company's out of business. Instead, what we really want to focus on is this return on investment. I can make $1 million, but if I have $100 million invested, then I haven't done as well as if I've made $1 million and I have $10,000 invested. So the real metric is all about return on investment. So flow is the lever for return on investment. And we have an equation that first came out in 2014 when Deborah and Chad wrote the book, Demand-Driven Performance. All benefits are directly related to the speed of flow. As flow improves, then cash velocity improves. As cash velocity improves, then our net profit divided by investment improves, and so does ROI. So what is flow? Flow is the rate at which our system, our supply chain, is going to convert material to product that's required by a customer. Cash velocity is the rate of our net cash generation. So we're looking at revenue minus our truly variable cost, not our fixed cost, our variable cost, minus the cash that we had to spend to keep open during this time period, right? So this is cash velocity. As we improve that cash velocity, by definition, we're going to improve net profit divided by investment, which means that we're driving return on investment. But you're probably asking, but what about cost? Cost is still important. And companies over the world have obsessed about cost performance. And we've obsessed about it from the strategic, tactical, and operational level. But cost strategies have a very interesting assumption. And that assumption is that we have a predictable and consistent volume that we can then maximize our profit and ROI, because we take what we expect to produce and we divide that into what we expect to spend in our fixed cost. And then if we achieve that volume, then we've minimized our cost. And so many companies are trying to force coherence across the company by saying, if I improve cost, then I will improve cash velocity. But as we all know, that's not the case. Coherence to cost is huge trouble in this VUCA world. It causes a massive misalignment, as we can see in the pictures. When we don't realize the volume that we expected, or we don't realize the product mix that we expected, there are 3 unavoidable bottom line effects. 1, I get too much of the wrong stuff. 2, I get too little of the right stuff. Overall, I have too much stuff, and I am spending a great deal of money to attempt corrections to try to get those costs down. And in fact, I end up spending more. I then fundamentally misalign my assets to the market. I'm building what I said I would in my forecast, instead of leveraging my capability to build what the market really wants. And the larger the disruption, the worse the misalignment. And we've seen so many major, massive disruptions here in the last couple of years. And the bigger the misalignment, the lower the chance we have of survival. So our very survival depends on flow. And even The Economist in their 2021 article said a focus on maximum efficiency harms resilience. And resilience is our key to survival. So what's the flow-based reality? Well, as we look at cost trying to drive ROI, cost is really an output, not an input. Cost is a consequence of flow within that defined period. So the better flow that we get through to the market in a certain period, the better the cost will be, because I'm going to have more units sold divided by my variable and fixed cost. So the reality is, a lot of people try to criticize this as cost accounting, but this isn't even cost accounting. Right? Cost accounting was never intended to be a managerial kind of situation. Cost accounting is really where cost comes out of flow. So flow driving ROI is managerial accounting. So flow is really the start for both cost accounting and managerial accounting. Cost accounting is a backwards historical view of what actually happened, and it's very accurate and it's very precise. Managerial accounting is how I use information to run my company. Cost was never intended to be a decision driver. The whole reason that cost accounting was created was to ensure very transparent, consistent reporting to our shareholders and, of course, to our tax authorities. It started in 1929 when the United States stock market crashed, and it started off the Great Depression. So we got to be missing something. And what are we missing? Well, public enemy number 1 is variability. Variability is that difference between our plan and what really happens. And as variability goes down, flow goes up. And as variability goes up, of course, flow goes down. We all know that. This is why we use so many analogies when we talk about lean with a river. And this is why Taiichi Ohno talked about his river production system. Well, how do I now mitigate variability? Well, visibility is how I define relevant information for making decisions. As visibility goes up, variability goes down. Now, as many of you know, I live in Arizona, but where I live gets snow. And I had to drive home in a snowstorm, and I was in the dark. And I hit something in the middle of the road that not only flattened my tire, it ripped out about a 1 by 3 inch strip out of my tire and broke the wheel. Well, I loved it when I was telling somebody how I had to change the tire in the snow and then limp my car home through a snowstorm. And they said, "Did you see what you hit?" I said, "If I would have saw what I hit, I wouldn't have hit it." As I have visibility, I can mitigate variability. If it had been a dry, sunny day, I never would have hit it because I would have been able to see it. But I was driving in the dark in a snowstorm. So my visibility was down, my variability was up. So my biggest question then becomes, as we set up this presentation today, is how do we gain visibility to relevant information in this crazy VUCA world that we're in order to best manage for flow? Well, the answer is we've got 4 building blocks of relevant information. Those 4 things are relevant ranges, having a flow-based operating model, having tactical reconciliation, and having flow-based metrics. And you can see this is a gold pan, and we're going to give you the golden nuggets here. First, what is a relevant range? Well, relevant ranges come from economics and managerial accounting. And this tells us in what time frame are the assumptions and our metrics and behaviors valid. Because what's relevant operationally is going to be very different than what's relevant strategically. And attempting to force fit irrelevant assumptions into the wrong range will distort information. So as I try to take strategic ideas and bring them operationally, as I try to consider fixed cost in my operational equation, then it distorts information. And these relevant ranges are managed by different people. I need to have a flow-based operating model. Protecting and promoting flow is how we drive our survival and our return on investment now and into the future. Flow is a unifying factor. The interesting thing is not just across operations, but between also functions across the supply chain. And so how our company can come into alignment and coherence to mitigate the variability. Cost is a consequence of flow over that defined period. And that's something important to remember. The cost is an output, not an input. So a flow-based operating model is defining our operational capability. And that's specifically designed on this fundamental principle of the key to protect and promote flow. So what are the assumptions of an operating model? Well, the first is that we want to align our assets as closely as possible to demand. We also understand we can never eliminate variability, but we can mitigate it with the right design. And no matter how good our planning and production is, we will never overcome a bad design. And focusing on our very precise synchronized planning and scheduling, trying to use all the functionality of the fast computing to compute in memory to very precisely calculate a schedule is largely a waste of time, because as soon as that schedule is produced, something's going to change. Because we're living in this area where customer tolerance times are too short, and so short that somewhere somebody across the supply chain has to carry inventory. Also, our batches have to be carried based on flow, not cost. And somewhere in the supply chain, we need capacity that's available. So we have protective capacity. We cannot run all of our resources full out. And this flies right in the face of the idea that if I have maximum efficiency and utilization, I'll be the most profitable. And that's a deep truth. In other words, it's false. We also need to understand our inventory is an asset, and we should have assets when they generate return on investment. And our overall operational capability must be adaptive to what's changing in the market. And that our bottom line is contribution margin. That is our primary operational objective. Our tactical reconciliation, understanding that the strategic is different than the operational. We have to have a bi-directional tactical reconciliation that allows us to align the strategic to the operational and the operational to the strategic. And we have to reconcile the differences in this constant bi-directional fashion. Because the reality is, there is only one source of sustainable competitive advantage, and that is to exploit your unique operational capability that provides value to the customer at a profit to yourself. Strategy's got to impact operations. Operations must impact strategy. Finally, we must have flow-based metrics. Any suite of metrics has to take into account the other three prerequisites. They've got to fit the range. They've got to fit the relevant range. They must support a flow-based operating model. And the metrics have to be reconcilable, not aggregated and disaggregated, reconciled. Big difference. And any attempt to force fit non-flow-based metrics into any range leads to conflicts, leads to sustainable company problems, and leads to distortions throughout the organization. It obscures what's relevant. So we need a new management model. We call it the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model, where we start looking from outside in as well as inside out. We look at operations. How do we configure that operating model so that it's a flow-based operating model and then feed back the variance analysis so that we understand what is our operating capability. We also have adaptive S&OP that gives us the business plan parameters, that range of the business plan. Every good company that designs a business plan has a desired, optimistic, and pessimistic number. It's a range. That range has to be translated to that operating model. But at the same point, we need to look at different scenarios. And that's why these model projections are so critically important as we consider these different scenarios. And if you follow the lines, you'll see that it looks like an infinity loop. And that's because it is. This is a continuous improvement process driving the company to increase return on investment now and into the future. It's left to right, looking at our operational capability, looking to the market. It's right to left, looking at the market, bringing it back into operational capability, allowing operations to drive to actual demand and overall driving the company to its sustainable desired future. It has relevant ranges. The operating model takes care of the operational relevant range. DDS&OP takes care of the tactical relevant range. Adaptive S&OP takes care of the strategic relevant range. The operational range is really quite short, longest decoupled lead time. Tactical range is quite long. It's twice our cumulative lead time of the product, looking backwards and looking forwards. And then the strategic, we're looking at the cumulative lead time and looking out to where all of our cost and capacity becomes variable. Our flow-based operating model. Don't forget what you already know. MRP, DRP, Lean, Theory of Constraints, Factory Physics, Six Sigma. Because it all comes together. It's been harmonized and works together because of the focus on flow. The operating model strategically places decoupling points and control points, as well as protecting those points through stock time and capacity buffers and allowing operations to pace to actual demand, actual customer requirements. So it's not just pull, it's position, protect, and pull. The master settings give us the position and the protect. That defines the capability of our operating model. Then pull is how we plan and schedule and manage and execute. So this is where we do our supply order generation as well as our operational management and start to drive innovation. So you can see it is a closed loop process of continuous improvement. This tactical reconciliation, we have several factors. One is a tactical review. Since now we can operate in a range, we now can use all of our Six Sigma tools to now look at the variances. We can project what we think might happen into the future. We can reconfigure that as our model changes and our environment changes, how do we need to model and remodel? And then where is it that we have opportunities? Where can we do a tactical exploitation where we've got short range supplements to flow where we could insource or provide a market opportunity? And then what strategic recommendations do we have? What needs to go to senior management for their approval that can help us improve the model? And then we anticipate and we participate in adaptive S&OP, where we bring our operational reality to the strategic side of the model, where we now have S&OP as management's critical handle on the business. So the tactical reconciliation helps drive adaptation. We have known since 1992 that S&OP had to be bidirectional. So it means that we have to have an emergence, a selection, and a feedback loop. And there's two adaptive loops. There's a tactical loop and a strategic loop. And these two loops have to be put together. All right, so, and you can see this is an infinity diagram. This is now and into the future. This is a constant that's happening over and over and over because we constantly new things that are going to emerge operationally. We have new ideas of innovation that are going to emerge strategically. So it's position, protect, pull, and the last piece is adapt. Based on the analysis, where is it and how is it that the company can achieve its desired future? So that's what I have for you today to set up the presentation. I believe Sviatoslav will be up next, and then we're going to hear a wonderful case study of how a company has developed such resilience that they're continuing to innovate even through a war in their own country. What questions do we have, Andre?
Now we look, one moment.
I had while Andre is looking, I had a question from in the LinkedIn before the webinar from our peers. So it sounds like if the company leaders think the DDMRP principles is interesting, but not willing to commit, what would you recommend to supply chain manager to change it?
What I would recommend is that the supply chain manager, always the answer is the same: affect what you can control. A supply chain manager cannot transform a company without the support of the executives. But if the supply chain manager is really responsible for the supply chain management, they can change how planning is done, which means getting their people educated in demand-driven principles and starting a DDMRP proof of concept pilot. Because the best thing to go to executives with is proof that the new concept works. So some executives, they really don't want to transform the company, and that's okay. But the supply chain manager can sure make their job easier and all other people's jobs easier by transforming their production planning to demand-driven principles. So my recommendation would be to put their people through the demand-driven planner course and allow their people to get out of the terrible oscillation, the terrible conflict that traditional planning puts them in, of having either too much of the wrong stuff, too little of the right stuff, and expediting, trying to get from the too wrong to the too right, and get out of that crazy Groundhog Day movie where we're trying to solve the same crises over and over again. So my advice to that supply chain manager is affect what you can control, change your planning processes, and hopefully, as the executives see the improved financial performance that supply chain has been able to deliver, they might become more interested in transforming the rest of the company.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. And there is one more question in the chat box. So when reconciling between three ranges, how would you deal with the differences in marginality, forecast at product family level and DDOM at SKU level, and difference in units of measure?
Well, at the end, when you consider adaptive S&OP, it's not unusual that there's a change in unit of measure, because typically in the adaptive S&OP side, the highest level of aggregation is, of course, revenue, dollars, pesos, whatever you measure your revenues in. So there has to be some kind of breakdown between product family down to the SKU level, because you're absolutely right. At the DDOM level, it has to be at the SKU base and at the unit of measure of that SKU. But we all know that, in each, if I've got an each, I might have it packed in a box, and that's my unit of measure, then that's my unit of measure. And how many boxes in a case and how many cases in a load. So we all have this kind of aggregation. And so not uncommon that we can transform from product family, all right, at the adaptive S&OP level down to the SKU level. So it's, we all understand the conversion between units of measure. And of course, at the adaptive S&OP level, we're typically dealing much more at the higher levels of aggregation. We're dealing at the revenue level, because especially when you consider things like the inventory target ratio, typically when we consider that in the adaptive S&OP process, that's going to be at a revenue level. It'll be at a dollar, peso, euro level, because that's the only way we can aggregate. But when we get down to the DDOM level, then we need the SKU-based unit of measure.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation and answers. We have no questions. That's why I think that we can continue. Sviatoslav, can you show your screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are in timing.
Yep, let me know, just type the plus in the chat box if you can see and hear me okay. Just a quick note. Yep, great, we can hear. Okay,
Yeah,
so
okay.
Yeah, I will tell a few words about presentations. Yeah, if you want to stay connected, there's the QR code. So for my LinkedIn, so we could just connect it if you want to, ask more details about your company, or we could discuss how to make a supply chain model, etc. So this is the LinkedIn code. So I will spoke today about the resiliency and what is like resilient supply chain. It's a buzzword, probably everyone heard it, and one of the buzzword in the Gartner's review also, and also very interesting anti-fragile. It's from the Nassim Taleb book. I think all of you, a lot of maybe heard of this before. So I will speak about how actually those concepts apply and how to build a resilient supply chain. And so again, I like this word about VUCA. I think everyone heard about it, and I will, as Carol was talking about, and I think we really know from the inside what it is when you have the COVID container and chip crisis, and you have one more, right? You have literally war in your country, and a lot of our clients was literally stopped. Not a lot, actually, all of them was stopped, but some of them was damaged. Some of them managed to evacuate, and but most of companies are just starting to rebuild, starting to revive, and continue to producing. As example, as Irina from Ptak, she will be our next keynote speaker. And our team also, most of my team, some of them are in Ukraine, migrate. A lot of people are in the Europe. So, but we are online, so consulting companies still can work and to help our clients and other companies to develop, right? Because our mission is to make innovations available, right, to the business. So this VUCA is really not a buzzword. It actually is the problem. But what does it mean I would say in a user level? This is a very nice slide. Nick Lynch from the Shell in the Demand-Driven World 2018, from his presentation, he saw the speed of change of active assortment. So blue line from the decade, yeah, right time. So you see that number of assortment is growing much more rapidly than the volume of sales in tons. So what does it mean? For example, if you want to sell, like a 10% more volume in tons, you need much more, like maybe 20 or 30% more SKUs and etc. So to what it basically leaves? It leaves that sale per item, or I would say share for one SKU in the whole assortment, is getting less and less. So if you speak about this in terms of forecast, so forecasting here, if you would use, I don't know, just simple average, would be much more accurate than here, and especially much more accurate than here. So it's not only about the forecast accuracy, it's about shortening the product life cycles, product variety, complexity. And it makes that basically there is no answer how the future would look like in the past data. Yes, we could not just, see the data, basically we would know the future. So the world basically moves from the linear to complex system. But does our management approach change, how we are basically managing the system? And I would basically, for now, guys, I want to discuss just share with you my experience from one of the international company we make the audit for. And obviously it's really high, complex and the big company with a lot of different production side, distributions, etc. But I want to get really to the basics. Obviously, they have a really advanced analytics model, analytics system, but actually in the core of all those dozens, I don't know the exact number, really a lot of different supply chain reports, they all based on quite simple ideas. And most of them are based in simple idea like some points in time. And DDMRP, I love like Carol quotes, it's all about flow, right? So I would just give you a few examples. So what is actually the problem? I know maybe it's in your companies also this way. For example, the goal, it's not the same. I changed it, but just to visualize the idea. The goal is that we want to have our warehouses to have 30 days turnover, like inventory turnover rate. Quite easy, quite straightforward. Everyone understands it, right? And to simplify, we have 3 warehouses and 3 SKU at each warehouse. So we have SKU A, B, and C. So 3 SKU numbers at the warehouse 1. We have SKU 1, 0 inventory, 30 units and 60 units, and the whole warehouse sells 90 units per month. So, right, we have 30 days warehouse turnover. Warehouse 2, again 30 days inventory turnover, and warehouse 3, again 30 days inventory turnover rate. What interesting is they all meet the goal of 30 days warehouse turnover, but as you understand, there is 3 totally different warehouses, right? So the situation with the inventories are different. And I think you see which warehouse is managed effectively. But there is also one interesting thing. If you take, for example, SKU B, it looks like there is no problem, right, with the inventory for SKU B. It looks okay, right? But if we deep dive, even the one of this best SKUs that is managed exactly the way the company wants, right? 30 days, if you assume we sell 1 unit per day, right? 30 units, 30 days, perfect. This is example for example, the SKU B. This is just current time, days, this is stock size. So this is some inventory level. Then this day we receive supply, then we just selling daily, or what? Again supply, again selling, supplies, selling, and etc. So this chart, if to visualize, probably the most familiar, everyone knows it, it just inventory is stocked daily. So if you see just inventory daily, nothing special, right? But this is 4 months. So you can assume this is 4 months, it's 120 dots in a line, 120. It's a lot to manage, right? You cannot go and check 1 SKU every day. So what does this company makes? They make inventory measurement once per month, right? Because this is the way how the board of directors, how the board investigate how the company is effective. So they do not watch at the line. All they have is 4 dots, 1 dot per month. And just if you see this like 4 dots, it's hard to understand, is it good or bad, right? In order to understand this, again, they have some inventory target level. So if you see at the target and you see those 4 dots, it looks like everything is okay. But if you spoke about not just about points in time, but if you spoke about managing a flow, so those 4 dots is not enough to understand if everything is okay or not. That's why we need the flow. So we need daily inventories. So we get rid of the dots. And if we have inventory here, obviously there is nothing to do. It's optimal stock, right? The further we go, right? Or up or down from this optimal point, it's getting a bit worse, but still nothing extraordinary. But when we leave, but when we reach in the critical point here, we should investigate. This point, yeah, not a problem. But if we have extra time, we can look why we have access a bit more inventories. But here again is the problem. So now we have 2 conflicting views, right? If we have some points of inventory, how we make, once per month, once per week, per quarter, etc. This is one of the conflicts we find out in a lot of the companies when the boards or the top management of the company does not see the problem, because if you look at the aggregated level, it looks kind of okay, not much of the problems. They just, especially if they came from finance or they then never been at the production side, they just don't understand why people always facing some troubles. I mean, levels are more or less as we expected. Yeah, we have some out of stocks. It's another report, but still, it's not that bad. But in real life, this is the way that actually people on the shop floor see the situation. They actually has to work daily. They has to produce and order inventories daily. This is how they see it. Yeah, but again, if you do not have this visibility, you cannot even affect the situation, or you cannot change it. So another question becomes, how should we manage the flow? How we could get the ranges? Because it's quite easy to get some target level estimate. There is few ways to understand it, to make it, yeah, so you can make it arbitrary, just CEO could choose, or the head of supply chain, or you can calculate it from the expected service levels and etc. But how could you estimate the ranges to manage the supply flow? So for this goal, we have the buffers in the DDMRP. So green is indicated or calculated mainly about MOQ and other ordering limitations. Yellow is the cycle stock. Red is a safety embedded in the buffer, not the safety stock, but the safety. So when we calculated the buffer, and there's a specific way how to calculate the buffer in the demand-driven methodology, you can easily calculate this range, optimal range. Red plus green, so here you go, the optimal range. The further you go from the optimal, it's getting worse in neither direction, up or down. It's still not in the optimal condition. So what you need to indicate if it's okay or not okay, just daily inventories, right? You have daily inventories, so you can see that this is the problem. Yep, not really a problem, but not just optimal condition. Yep, this is the problem. But again, on this level, I clearly can see the problem. Yeah, and also if I want to see the future, I can project and capture not only the current problems, but also the possible, the model one. But the problem becomes, I have few hundred SKU on the one warehouse, on the one plant is producing. I have a bunch of the plants and the big distribution network. I cannot look at the lines for each SKU. How can I aggregate, and how can I see the actual situation of my inventories in the supply chain, not just on the aggregated, not just like oversimplified level when I lose the clear visual, right? So for this one, we have target inventory. If we have the line, this is the target. For each point of time, this one is, I'm in green color, right? So I'm in the optimal. This one, I am in yellow, I'm in red, I'm in blue if it's excess inventory. So I can understand for each SKU in which color I am, and what is interested more, how far from the target I am. So this is the view of the chart at the aggregated level. So here we can see the hundreds of the SKUs, but not just inventory dynamics, but we see this is the value of inventory. So currently company has around 550 million in inventories. Target is about 300 million. So we can get around, 40% less inventory, yeah, if we just get rid of this blue. Remember, it's blue, it's excess inventories. So we could have not just the overall rough estimation what we have, yeah, but we could see the structure of the inventories, what actually is happening. So we are going from the over simplified estimation that everything is look kind of okay, and even if something is bad inside, we don't know what is the difference between those two, right? We cannot get the difference between warehouse 2 and 3. Yeah, we can get difference between warehouse 1 and 2 if we make some additional reports like inventory 0 and etc. Or if you look at the certain point in time, you know that certain points in time, it just could happen that you do not have actual problems those days, but you could have problem day before, day after. So you need to have the ability to see the problem. So if you not see the problem, you cannot approach this. But actually, the problem, I hope you see the difference between the point managing some point in time reports, right, and between the flow. But in real life, it's actually a bit more complicated because in real life we have, for example, bill of materials, right? If we those points is the SKU numbers in the bill of material structure. And for example, we need to build this finished good. We need like 60 days to do this, but the clients would not want to wait that long. We can see, let's say 14 days. We receive the order, we need to fulfill it. Obviously, we cannot make to order this. So what we do, what usually most of the companies do, right? We use forecast. We use forecast, like for example, this 2 months ahead. They're not always the highest accuracy, and this system is very fragile. I want to focus on this word, on the word fragile. What does it mean, fragile, guys? So the problem is what? Even let's assume that what does it mean they have a 50% accuracy forecast? There's high probability of say 50% that I would use my capacity, inventories, and I will be building not what actually client wants. I would build something that I, in this point of view, expected the clients would buy here, right? This is usually a safety stock is used in the class DDMRP system to compensate this forecast error. But the problem is system is fragile. What does it mean fragile? This block, this SKU number could start the work only when this inventory is available and the work before him was done. So if we have materials, we have capacity, we done the work, then we can start here. And this one can start only those two work without error. So basically you can easily calculate it. Yeah, if let's assume that this is like 90% level reliability. This is 90% reliable. So the chance that those two will work simultaneously is about 81%, right? And the more system you connect, dependent systems, right? The less ability or the less possibility that it will work as we planned. And we have not one SKU, we have a lot of them. So what is the consequence? I think you have this like overstocks, out of stocks, and expedites, right? Costly expedites, and the bonus, multiple Excel spreadsheets with calculations just to compensate that. We need anti-fragile system. What does it mean, this word anti-fragile? Let's get what is fragile. It's the cup, right? It's our MPS plan for months. It looks perfect, really perfect. But the problem is any small change, any Murphy strike, obviously it will break, right? What is the solid? Solid is like a rock. Yeah, if you drop it, you'll still be okay, at least to some point, right? But what mean anti-fragile? What is opposite of the cup? Anti-fragility is the ability to adapt and become stronger when confronted with chaos. And this ability only for the complex systems and for the human. For example, if you try to pull up at the bar at the beginning, if you didn't do any exercise, it would be really hard. But I know with a few weeks of training, will be able to make a few pull-ups, right? And time like 5, 10, etc. So you can become stronger, right? And the same with the systems. But the problem is, it's not obvious and it's hard to manage the chaos, right? I mean, what is not, when we do not know what will be happening in future. So in order to simplify, we just using the linear control for the complex system. We just assume that, okay, system is complex. Yeah, but let's assume it's simple, linear, and let's manage it the way we used to it. An example, yeah, remember how we done it. So, okay, I know it's a lot of dependencies, but let's assume that we have the materials, we have the capacity. Let's assume everything will go according to the plan. Let's assume we know the future, and let's make the schedule and make everything work. But actually, it will not. This is an example from his book, and here basically he's showing that from the economy, yeah, it's how the government regulations affect the overall economy. So when the regulation is accepted and the system is just like a straight line, it is, and it's quite predictable, but to some point, because at this point, this stability for over this period, it comes at a huge price, because the gap between what is presumed and reality, it increases. And the same with our production. Why we always, if we have the MPS, it looks perfect, but a few days pass and we need to neither reschedule or ignore the real life. So each company decides what they will do, right? Or what is better. But and the same, guys, the same applies not only about the economy, production schedule. Probably the easiest visualization you can find, just type in Google after the presentation if you're interested. For example, currency, Ukrainian, Kazakhstan country, Belarus, even the Russian ruble, I know any from the post-Soviet countries, you will see those two graphs. So this is like a step function when the government had a fixed exchange rate. And when the economy wasn't able to keep that rate, then the currency devaluated like 2-3 times. Then again, it was stable for a couple of years, and again, right? And now in the most countries, it's volatile. Yeah, so it depends from the supply and demand with some government regulations. But the new question becomes: if we know how the linear system works, but how could we use nonlinear system to manage this complicated one? And the idea behind what actually Carol just spoke before in the details is the demand-driven adaptive enterprise model. You use adaptive cycles like strategic and tactical one. But what does it look like in a practical way? Yeah, in a quite sequence, in a quite simple one. So if we see the MRP side, right, we know there is all dependencies, and that's the way how it should be done, right? If you want to build the product. But if we find the key points in the system where we could break out all those dependencies, we can make system stronger. Let's assume that this one, in terms of production, just break down. What will happen to the end result if the system is connected? You know, we will not be able to do it in 60 days. We'll do it in 60+ days, right? But in this system, let's assume this one breaks down. The same, right? What will happen? And actually, in this one, nothing. Why? Because we have the buffer here, and inventory is not just units, pallets, dollars that we are storing. Yeah, it's also stored capacity, production capacity. So what does it mean? Even if this one breaks down and they are not able to finish the job correctly, it's not a problem. They could catch up later. They have the buffer and they have the priorities, and etc. But this one can start to work much faster to fulfill the job. So we cannot make sure that all the machines will be 100% accurate, but we can make the system more resilient, right? More anti-fragile. And again, this is black points, dot line, right? Black dots, if you can see. This is our forecast, and the white line is the actual sales. This is because it's white. We don't know what the actual sales would be, right? If we are in this point, yeah, we could just have some focus, some estimation, but what the real sales would be, we do not know that. Yeah, we could have the optimistic and conservative scenarios, but what is interesting, we can convert this forecast into the ranges, and we can manage the system by the ranges. So even if we have this spike demand here, and we have more demand than we expected, so we have this range of opportunity to cover it, and we could fulfill this order. For example, if some crisis happened, I don't know, some economics, political, or whatever crisis becomes, and your sales, for example, this product or this line would like overnight goes to zero, you still would not make any overstocks as you would do with the forecasted orders in the traditional MPS. Why? Because you will not build more than the buffer you have. So even you would not generate excess inventories, even if there would be no demand. So we have to remember, guys, we face the problem. We know the system is complex and it's fluctuating, and it's actually kind of hard to understand how we should manage this chaos. So traditional system is try to sometimes a bit simplify, but it's not actually simple. Usually those companies have really hundreds of reports, and it's really complex. Not all of them are using, and I assume that also in your company there's really a lot of supply chain reports. But the overall idea is that we just assume perfection, right? And if we assume perfection, we can build the perfect schedule that obviously cannot be executed, right? So we need the systems that could manage in terms of complex and adaptive systems. So we need to make the system from fragile, make it more stable, more resilient, make it anti-fragile, and be able to not only react for the current demand orders, but also be a tool for the top managers to adapt and control the system. Guys, on this point, you can find your company and look what is the aggregated results or the effects you could get. If there is no industry in these lines, you can see just on the average. This is exact, real life cases, project experience for IBM Cloud and our dear partners from demand-driven technologies. So it's the case studies that we have. If you're interested in details, you can contact us and we would give some examples from your industry and how could DDMRP be applied in your company specifically. And a few short conclusions, guys. The pace of change will only increase. You probably all recognize this picture from Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, when she said, if you want to stay in one place, you need to run as fast as you can, and you need to run twice as fast if you want to get something. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It works before, right? Traditional management, how it basically works. We just make a quite good forecast. We have bill of material and we have MRP system. We have some workarounds. Let's automate it, and you just make system more advanced, more automated, take into account more different factors. Let's include our capacity. Let's include costs. So it was just doing the same way, but more faster in a more sophisticated and complicated way, right? But the real thing is that maybe we should review how the system works. The foundation, the basic ideas that lies in the system. This is the Dodo Beard. It's from the Carol presentations. I like this example. She always is talking about that. Dodo Beard, she lived in the Mavriki Island. I think in the 16th century when people first came from Europe, colonized it, and the beard has no I would say natural enemies, so they wasn't afraid of no one. They were just very calm and wasn't running from people or any dogs or any other animals that basically could harm them. And they from the whole island, they literally extinct in less than 100 years. So the idea is that do not let the speed of external change exceed the company's internal ability to adapt, right? So if they would look just in the past to model how the future would look like, it would look pretty straightforward, right? Nothing happened from the thousands of years, more or less stayed the same. Fast changes, and they wasn't able just to adapt. So we should not be a dodo, right? So my conclusion and just advice: be anti-fragile, be demand-driven. And if you have questions, guys, feel free to ask, or maybe you could raise a hand You could ask your microphone, you can type it. So.
You can type your questions in chat, but we now have no time. We need to continue with the presentation of Irina. And if you type some question, I think that we will stop at the end of our webinar and will answer.
Okay.
Thanks, Sviatoslav, for your presentation. Irina, do you hear me? Can you show your screen?
Yeah, sure. Okay. My name is Irina. I'm the head of purchasing department of Ptak company, Ukraine. I'm sorry, I'm a bit worried because it's my first experience of webinar. Today we're speaking about the project of optimization of inventory management, which was carried out with our colleague from IBM Cloud Company. I was the project head manager from the customer side. I'd like to say a few words about our company. Ptak was founded in 2007 in Kramatorsk, Donetsk region, and at 2014, when the Russian invasion to Donetsk region has started, the company, including warehouse and office staff, moved to Gostomel and after that to Bucha. There we've been working until the 24th of February. Ptak is one of the most of the biggest importer of fasteners and fixing material in Ukraine, and one of the main supplier for DIY chain. Before the project start, we had a warehouse with area more than 5,000 square meters and 15,000 pallet spaces. 150 employees worked for our company. We cooperated with 83 partner stores, and we made more than 10 million shippings per year. So let's continue. Our main clients were Epicenter and Leroy Merlin. It was one of the biggest supply chains, DIY chains, I'm sorry, in Ukraine. When Obi and Practica worked in Ukraine, our share on the shelf was near 100%. And there were the following issues in inventory planning and management that time. We had large stocks. Of course, it helped us to keep our service level at target range, but at the same time, it froze working capital and reduced turnover. We generated our orders and plans manually, and to be honest, very often they were quite inaccurate, and it was impossible to analyze changes in inventory levels and in the whole supply chain. What challenges we faced too before the project starts? As I said, we had a huge assortment. It includes now more than 12 SKU and SKU with different lead times, and of course we know that it's quite different to manage them. Any of basic characteristic of SKU weren't parameterized. We made our plans and our forecasts and our orders with Excel, and the influence of human mistake factor is pretty big in this case. We all know that it's enough to make only one mistake in one box to make the whole calculation correct. As well, pandemic, we all suffered from pandemic and lockdown and from volatile demand. Our forecasts were totally inaccurate, and constant improvement, unstoppable drive is a drive to constant perfection is one of the basic fundamentals of our company. So we realized that we need to do something to automate. We need automatization of our supply chain planning. When we had to make choice of software, we've just picked the site on the methodology. I visited the DDMRP workshop, and when we discussed with my colleague its main keys, we realized that it's something very close to the method we use, but with significant distinctions. So we've been thinking if we had to buy ready-to-use software or to improve our own operational system. Regarding to development our ERP, there were a lot of uncertainties, not only as for cost but also as for results. On the other hand, Intuiflow, based on the DDMRP, gives us answer for all these questions. All main points were defined before the project start, and I'd like to emphasize that we haven't gone off at terms and budget. So it was very, very important for us, and as well we received references from companies which already have provided Intuiflow, and we realized that it matched with all our needs. The main advantage of the DDMRP is that it includes the main keys of modern methods of planning and managing supply chain, consolidated by innovations block. So the main reason to choose Intuiflow for us was we got the whole supply chain in one intuitively comprehensive system, which allows us to reduce reaction rate, to increase supply chain reliability, and to provide return of investment growth. What should we do to manage the assortment more than 10,000 SKU with lead time from 3 to 200 days? Our first steps were the follows. Characteristic parameterization. We assigned such attributes for all SKU as order cycle, fixed lead time, MOQ, ADU or FDU, main supplier, and so on. After that, we divided them to group, make, or buy, and sort them out according to lead times. After that, we defined clear planning and execution priorities. And instead of different formulas in different Excel files, we got single and simple order calculation methods and reliable planning tools. There were 3 milestones of this project: launch preparation, project launch, and parameter optimization. Each of them took approximately 2 months. During the first stage, IT specialists and managers of supply of purchasing and execution department spent near 30% of their working time. When we were on the second stage, we spent approximately half of our working time, but loading on IT went down. And by the end of the third stage, we spent much less time on the project and we worked completely. I'd like to say more detailed about each stage. When we were on the first stage, first of all, we completed methodology training. After that, we digitized procurement and production conditions. Our IT specialists provided data exchange between ERP and Intuiflow, and instance rollout was completed. During the project launch, we fixed data errors, calculated buffers, and as a result, we generated and sent first orders. By the end of the third stage, the whole assortment, our assortment was in the system. We learned to work with alerts and reports. We analyzed MOQ, and we calculated production order cycle. About the order cycle, I'd like to say more detailed, and I'd like to say about how it helped us to reconcile fixed business assets with change in demand. When the 2021 beginning, we all suffered from lockdown, and it led us to demand decrease and to redundancy of work power in company. To save our warehouse team and to enable their operation, we have to make some changeovers, a lot of changeovers. We reduced the order cycle for make items, and accordingly the batches. As a result, we kept less quantity of goods on stocks, but we became more flexible regarding to constantly changing demand, and we provided steady work for our warehouse team. And of course, when the lockdown finished, we reset the system and return to our previous parameters. So what has changed for us with providing Intuiflow? We all know such problem as the model distribution. Maybe near 90% of company reported about them. Then a lot of inventory either are in too little or too much range, and very little is within optimal range. With providing Intuiflow, the distribution looks like that. The most inventory is into optimal range, and inventory we have to order, where we have to order is in yellow zone, and very little is in zone little or much. How it looks in the system. Overstocked SKU are colored blue, missed SKU are colored red, colored yellow it's time to order, and colored green it's okay with them. And you can see that we had, before the project start, we had more than 47% of overstocked SKU and 20% of missing goods. By the autumn of 2021, we had 33 and 10% appropriately. So you can see that providing Intuiflow led us to reduce our problem by 2 times. And as well, one of the significant result of providing Intuiflow was that we raised our service level by 6%. We all know how it's difficult to increase on time and full level after 90%. Our starting level was 92, but it wasn't enough for us. We are quite ambitious. So we even didn't expect that in very short term we can get 20 or 97 an average percent service level. According to classic paradigm, we would have to increase our inventory, but we reduced them almost by 2 times, you know. So it was a very great fact for us. And of course, the main key result is that it was automatization of our process. We get more time for new project, for development, and the accuracy of our forecast became high too. That's all. I'm very appreciative for your attention, and I will be glad to answer your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Irina, for presentation. There is one question. Did you see it, or I need to read?
Just a sec.
I'll read. It's no problem.
Yeah,
Irina,
okay.
Irina, very nice presentation. Thank you. Can you elaborate if and how you do DD and S&OP? How do you know when a buffer is sized correctly? What are your criteria?
We didn't know if they are correct at the start of the project. We calculated them with the help of our colleagues from ABM Cloud, and after that, we try we start working, and we can see how the level of inventory change, and we can see, you know, we'll experience, but and we saw how the whole system react on buffers, and how it asked to how many it asked to buy. Is this quantity was adequate or not? And it was something between intuition and experience and calculation.
Between intuition and the Intuiflow.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for question and answer. Impressive results. It's not question, but it's okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if somebody have more question, you can type it. And I want to say that we are in timing. Thanks, Irina. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Sviat. Thanks, everyone, for attention and time and your questions. We hope that information was useful. If you are interested in a presentation of software, which are Irina implemented, you can type in a chat, or one moment, I will share the screen. Or you can scan QR from the screen and let us know about your interest, and we can contact you to arrange a meeting. Thanks everyone. Good luck and hello from Ukraine.